Carl Coulange for the Sports Hit List by the fans and for the fans. I have a very special guest with me, the University of New Orleans Athletic Director, Mr. Tim Duncan. Tim, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining me on this special podcast.
I'm great, Carl. How about you, man? Thanks
I'm
for
hanging in there. Do people confuse you a lot with the basketball player Tim Duncan? Do you get that a
lot? Yeah, they do. And I'm the original Tim Duncan because I'm a little bit older, and I like to say the young fella's done pretty well to my name. So let him help brand me.
I hear that. I'd also like to throw out a special shout out to Megan O'Brien. Megan, for making the connection. Right. She sent me your video. I had the privilege and honor of working with Megan at St. Francis College, where back in 2008 when I was a student, and she was working in the athletic department. So she's really cool friends. And as soon as she sent me the video, she said, just contact him and we could definitely get an interview. So thank you to her.
Yeah, absolutely. Megan's awesome. So thanks. I'm glad she made the connection.
Yeah. So she sent me a video saying prior to George Floyd's murder, you had experienced something 5 days prior. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened to you?
Yeah, so I've been at the University of New Orleans for a year, but my family stayed in the Boston area because I had a job there previously at Northeastern, and our son was a senior in high school. He's a 2020 graduate from Newton North High School in Newton, Massachusetts, is a suburb of Boston. So I was up there a couple of weeks ago to pack the house and move them down because they're going to do a virtual graduation, and school for all intents and purposes was done. So I was up there to move them, and my wife and I were taking a break one afternoon and decided to walk to Whole Foods. So that tells you the type of neighborhood it is, a nice suburban neighborhood, great schools with the Whole Foods that was in walking distance. Whole Foods and a Trader Joe's, actually, within walking distance of my home. So we started on our walk, and a block over from our house, we were surrounded. 4 cars came up pretty aggressively and seemed like a coordinated attempt. And one of the officers jumped out with a gun, pointed toward me directly and asked me to put my hands on my head and barked orders and asked, did I have a gun? Where did I live? What was I doing in the neighborhood? And asked me to reach for my ID, and I declined to reach for it and nodded toward the officer closest to me and say, can he get it out? Because that's one of the things, as at least my parents had talks with me when I was a kid and growing up, to not make any sudden movements or reach in your pockets, around over-aggressive cops. So they reached in, they verified who I was and gave my wallet back. They apologized, and then and they said, well, we're looking for a murder suspect. And I was like, is he a 6'8" black man? I'm 6'8", obviously.
Yeah.
And they said, well, no, but they did describe him as tall. And that was it. And then they left, and my wife and I continued to walk to the store. We got our items, came back, talked to the kids. She was really adamant about telling the kids that she thought it was such a good idea by me not to reach in my pocket after they told me to get the ID, after they had told me not to move and put my head. So I did that. So we talked to them, made sure that they understood, had that talk again with them. And then 5 days later, George Floyd was killed. And of course, like many people, I was outraged at watching, a murder real time on television. And then, but I still didn't correlate my incident with his until one of my friends who I had mentioned it to said, Tim, that could have been you. And then that's when I started to ask the question, why am I normalizing this process? Why okay for, and that's not the first time that, officers have pulled a gun on me unnecessarily. The other one was doing traffic stops. But why am I normalizing a situation that's not normal? Why am I okay with this and justifying it when it's not cool? Excuse me. I understand I have a job to do, and they have to do their job. They were looking for a murder suspect. Absolutely. But is there any other way that they could have gotten to the bottom of the of this person walking down the street with his wife in broad daylight? Could they have used any other methods to find out whether or not I was that person or not? And I think there, obviously are ways to do that. And so I wanted to utilize this as a learning, a point of education for our student athletes. And so we had conversations with our student athletes over the weekend. And prior to me releasing it, I told them about the experience, wanted to get their feedback. They were very appreciative of me sharing it with them. And then I posted it, and from there, it has, taken a life of its own, which is a little bit overwhelming, but, to have to talk about that over and over. But how I look at it, if it helps educate some or help other folks identify with me and say, well, yeah, I went through that too, Tim, I get it. Then I think it was worth it in the end.
I'm sorry you and your wife had to experience that. It's really tragic to hear that happened.
Thank you.
Are you in the process, or did you think about taking any action towards that police department for what happened to you, or?
No, not at all, man. That never even came up. There wasn't a thought in my mind. It wasn't a thought in my mind initially, and then it hadn't been a thought in my mind. And then I've received calls from the mayor of Newton, the chief of police, and they have a civil rights officer in the Newton department. And they all apologized profusely. And the chief of police said something when he said that, I need to self-reflect to see what we can do better in those situations. He said, thinking back, I could have called you, that day or later in that week and, talked about it. And, maybe there are some different ways we can, try to find murder. So I appreciate the fact that he was self-reflective in our conversation. And I wasn't, and part of that, I'm sure, is, they don't want me to file a complaint, but I didn't have any intentions on doing that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate the effort of calling to make sure that we're okay. And the town of Newton is such a bedroom community that my son's high school principal called me, my son and daughter's middle school principal called my wife, neighbors called, her boss called her that when she worked there. So people were really concerned because that area is pretty liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that near Waltham by any chance?
It is near Waltham. It's a little bit. It's east of Waltham, closer to downtown, but it's close to Brookline, close to Chestnut Hill, where Boston College is.
Yeah.
It's not far at all.
Yeah, so I'm a Celtics fan, so and I have family who lives there in Waltham, so I'm always like every year I take a trip down there. My godson's down there, so I'm always in that area.
Yeah, I'm sure you've driven through Newton to get to Waltham before.
Yeah. So right now in my school, I'm working with the multicultural activities director to try to figure out what steps should we take moving forward, because I deal with students too, just like you do. What are the steps that your University of New Orleans is taking after this? And have there been protests on campus? I know right now we're still dealing with COVID-19 and possibly some social distancing, but what are the steps that the university is taking in terms of course of action after the death of Mr. Floyd?
Yeah, well, we're not open. So our president made he gave a statement, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but
that's fine, man. Go ahead.
He texted me and said, man, Tim, I'm tired of this racist bullshit. And I believe him. That's just the type of good man that he is. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with our faculty. We have a new student athlete class that all the freshmen and transfers take. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to work with the provost to have one of the faculty members come and teach a couple of classes on race and politics. Talk about that intersection. I think we're going to try to elevate social justice as one of our core tenets. And then what I'd like to do and what I talk to the students about is how can we mobilize to help people vote? Because all politics are local, basically. And the district's attorneys are the ones who refuse to press charges. And yeah, they press charges after 4 days for Derek Chauvin and after 9 days on the other 3 officers. But why did it take so long?
Right.
If you or I did something that is suspected to be a crime, we're going to go to jail first. Then they're going to figure out if they have enough evidence to charge us once we're in jail. But with officers who we have video evidence, they take their sweet time, and that's not cool. And we need to hold them accountable. So I think we're going to work with our student athletes. There's a national organization called RISE that helps with voter turnouts and voter registration. So I think that might be a way that we go as well. And of course, we'll have additional speakers, and we will figure out a couple of other ways to make an impact. I know that's one, particularly in our city of New Orleans, that we can make an impact by getting people out to vote. Because most folks, particularly I won't say one group or other, but there are a lot of folks who really only pay attention to elections during the national elections.
Absolutely, yeah.
Important, for sure, that's absolutely important. However, local elections are very important, and that's where the rubber meets the road. And I think that's where we need to make sure that we, spend some time.
Do you have any word for the fall? I know with my school right now, we're waiting on Governor Cuomo to make a call whether we're going back full time in the fall. I know you have about 14 sports, right? So has there been any discussions about what's going to happen, or is it touch and go to see what's going on with new social distancing rule? Are you guys going to play with empty stadiums? How is that affecting the everyday life of if you guys could even get back in time to start this program?
Yeah, well, our state is opening up slowly. We're in phase 1 now. We're supposed to enter phase 2 this week. New Orleans is a little bit less, it's more conservative, I'll put it that way, than our state because of, we're the largest metropolitan area in the state. Mm-hmm. But we are planning to be in school on time. We're going to bring our we don't have football, but we're going to bring our men's and women's basketball student athletes back July 6th. And then we're going to test them and isolate them for a week before allow them to start workouts with their team. The NCAA allows Division I men's and women's basketball to have coach-led workouts in the summer. So before we can do that, we'll test them, quarantine them, and do all of that. But we're expected to have school starts on August 18th, and right now we're working toward that'll be what happens, and we'll test all of our student athletes during their physicals. We have to give them physicals every year anyway. Our team doctors are a part of a hospital system here, Ochsner, that is a monster. It's a giant. So they have resources that can help us test our student athletes. If they test positive, we'll quarantine them. We've already worked with housing. They have a process to quarantine student athletes, just any student. If they are tested positive, we'll start off our season social distancing fans.
Just limiting fans, maybe no fans at all until everything.
We'll have fans, but our places are big enough that I think we can spread them out accordingly. For example, we play in a 10,000 seat arena and we don't average that. So we'll have a chance to spread that out for basketball and for baseball. So I think that we can get by with still having fans and spread them out accordingly and have them socially distance. And I'm not sure if we'll require masks, but that's something that we'll talk about as well. We've already started talking about whether we will require them at all.
So yesterday I did a show on Drew Brees and his comments, and it just so happens I'm about to interview the athletic director for New Orleans, the University of New Orleans, and Drew Brees makes his comments. So I literally said to my friends, I'm like, I have to ask him this question. How were his comments received from that community? Have you spoke to anyone about his comments this morning? This morning he made an apology. So what's your take on Drew Brees over the last 2 days and what he said and what he apologized for and how it's going to be received in the community of New Orleans?
Well, first, let's talk about how much of an icon he is here in this city. People loved him. He helped. He was the face of the city post Katrina when it was emotional when they came back and they beat the Falcons on that Monday Night Football. He led them to a Super Bowl, their only Super Bowl in the city's history that had been perennial losers for the most part, but outside a few years of success. So, I mean, they revered Drew Brees here, no matter the race. They loved him dearly. So to hear them say that affected a lot of people negatively, for sure. And they had protests last night, and a large part of the protest was F Drew Brees, F Drew Brees. They chanted over and over and over. And for him to fall so far so quickly is amazing. But I think that at the very least, he was tone deaf to what was happening in the country. That's his right to think what he wants to think about the flag. This is not the time to talk about. And particularly because Yahoo Finance, which is interesting that they are the ones who got this quote, they asked him a question. I don't remember the exact question, but it was something like, so tell me what you think about what's going on in the country.
Yeah, I think the question was more so about because of what's going on, do you believe players will take a knee when the season starts? So yeah, something along those lines. Yeah. So
it wasn't. They led him down the path, but he's been through media training. I've been media training. You have to stick to your agenda. So I think that he wanted to say what he wanted to say, and it was tone deaf because it's clearly not the time to talk about that. It's already been established that Colin Kaepernick spoke to a veteran, and the veteran said, instead of sitting, why don't you kneel? That's what we do, and that's a sign of respect. And he said that time and time again, and he said time and time again, his protest was not about the flag. It was about social justice and the mistreatment and the killing of unarmed Black people. So he may have those feelings about his grandfathers who fought in World War II, I assume World War II, but my father was a Vietnam vet, and he didn't get a hero's welcome. And then the African-American men who served in World War II as well had to come back to Jim Crow. So the fact that in his mind, that's disrespecting the flag, he can have that thought if he wants. But the time to talk about it is not now, when Malcolm Jenkins said, well, America is burning.
Yeah.
Literally in pain. There are people who are so fed up with this, and there are people who look like our entire country. I mean, the protests this time seem to be a lot more diverse than any of the ones that I've seen since Dr. King.
Mm-hmm.
To ignore the pain that people are going through, to have that conversation is clearly tone deaf. His apology was fantastic. I mean, he hit every note that you want to hit in an apology. It was sincere. He took accountability for his actions. He didn't put any solutions in there, but he did talk about, this is my fault. I want to stand with Black people and be a leader of Asia. It hit all the right notes. But there will be some people who will never forgive him.
That was going to lead to my next question is, going into the season, and we like to believe the NFL will be back. Do they forget about it in New Orleans, or do they kind of forgive and not forget? Like how will he be received? Is he sinking? Is he swimming? Post his comments now.
I think there will be a segment of population who will never forgive him. I think people likely will, because they're going to have a great season, I'm sure. I think if he wins a Super Bowl and on stage when accepting the MVP trophy or the Super Bowl trophy, he says, let me apologize again to my city. I said some stupid stuff. Here's what I'm going to do. If he does that, he's going to be loved forever. When he gets a chance to publicly say, if he has to, his actions now have to match his apology. So if he gets involved in legislation, if he gets involved in organizations to help help us overcome the killing of unarmed Black men, and he's sincere and does that, then I think he'll win a whole bunch of people back for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Want to love him. They love these Saints down here. I've never seen it. I've lived in a lot of different cities.
Yeah.
Huge Steelers fan myself. I grew up not in Pittsburgh, but I just grew up a Steelers fan, and I'm hard too. But this whole city is in mourning when the Saints lose. That's how it is.
Yeah.
So they want to love him.
Yeah.
He has to earn that love back.
Well, that must be tough for you. You grew up in Massachusetts, right?
No, I grew up in Memphis.
Memphis, okay, Memphis.
Born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and back in the 70s, the only teams that came on in Memphis were Pittsburgh and Dallas, and my dad, and I definitely was not going to root for them. Grew up a Lynn Swann fan, and I've been a Steeler fan since I was 8 years old. So I grew up in Memphis. I played basketball in Memphis, and then since then I've lived in a lot of different places. I lived in Massachusetts the last 2 years prior to moving here. But so I'm a Steelers fan. It was tough living in Massachusetts as a Steelers fan, but I can
the Patriots, yeah.
I can pridefully say I did not watch one play the entire year. So I am very happy about
that. So to kind of end off, I feel like it's time that we should end off on a light note. With everything going on, we've dealt with COVID the last 3 months, now dealing with the death of George Floyd. Now it's possible that sports are coming back. From your perspective, how much were you missing sports? And now that you're in the process of planning for it to come back, sports in your life as an athletic director, as a fan of the game, of any kind of game, how excited are you to try to get the process of sports to return to television, or just sports to return in general?
I'm really excited, man, because I mean, it's a unifying thing that it allow Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever, to have some common interests. And common rooting or common trash talk if you're on different opponents. It's an awesome unifying thing, man, that I can't wait to get back. I think that's why the Jordan ratings, The Last Dance, was so high, because we were
absolutely
for anything. It was appointment television for my entire family. I mean, from my 12-year-old daughter to both my sons to my wife, every Sunday night we're watching.
Me too. We did a review for it every single show for the podcast. Every single show we did a review for it. Yeah.
That's how much we were craving for, just sports content, and that was perfect timing for them. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm ready to, get things back to somewhat normal. It won't ever be the same. I think there are, will be some people who will always be leery about coming in public, and there will be some people that will always wear masks, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm ready for our student athletes to, first of all, check out and be healthy and be able to compete and stay healthy. That is the most important thing.
Any final thoughts to the community? Anything else you'd like to say?
I would just challenge everyone to don't shy away from some of these difficult conversations. I think that's the only way that we can start to put some sunlight on, some of the things that some people choose not to see about our society. We have a great country, but our country has some work to do to make it great for all of us. And it's difficult conversations, education, and voting are the key to make sure that we can impact change.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. Personally, New Orleans is at the top of my wife and I's list in terms of travel places. We haven't been to California yet.
Yeah.
I want to visit every state before I die, so I'm clearing the bucket list. Now I have a contact in New Orleans. I hope to attend a game, something, just to come down and say hi.
Man, come to New Orleans. The food is awesome. It's great when you can take a cold beverage, whatever it is, and walk up.
Yeah.
Not just Bourbon Street, but any street in the city.
I hear that.
Walk around with a cold beverage on a hot day. That's a beautiful thing. So come on down. We'll grab some great food. We can I can take you to some of the local spots, and we can have a great time. Absolutely.
And if you have any athletes who want to come on to our show, please let us know. I'm all for interviewing athletes. I'm all about it.
Well,
I'm currently at Iona right now doing my second master's studying in sports communication.
Awesome.
So anything in sports, I've never played because I was never athletic enough to play. But in terms of covering sports and media, writing articles, doing videos, that's all I'm about. So if you have any athlete you want us to talk to, I'd love to connect with you some more.
Well, thank you, Carl. I appreciate that, man. Thanks.
No problem.
And having me a part of your show. I definitely appreciate it.
No problem. Be sure to like the Sports Hit List by the fans for the fans. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Thank Mr. Duncan, the original Tim Duncan, for joining me on this podcast. Everyone have a good day.
All right. Thank you.